I let her tow my boat away because I wanted her to. That's right. I didn't just catch Vivian Harcourt, the HOA board president, overstepping her authority. I invited her to do it. You see, after 20 years as a marine engineer, surviving brutal offshore projects and endless bureaucratic meetings, all I wanted was quiet. That's why I moved to Lake Ridge, a lakeside community with a loose HOA, no oppressive rules, no micromanagement of every detail, just water, my boat, and peace. For 3 days, I had exactly that. Then Vivian showed up, clutching a violation notice like it was a royal decree. She said my garage violated regulations. I told her the property was mine. She didn't like that, very much. And when she had my boat, Phantom, towed away, she discovered what happens when you mess with someone who knows how to set the perfect trap. Before we begin, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. The garage was empty when I walked out that Thursday morning at 7:30 a.m. I stood there holding my coffee mug, staring at the oil stain where the boat had sat on its trailer for exactly 3 days. I made sure my expression looked confused, maybe a little irritated, in case anyone was watching. The performance mattered. 20 years of project management taught me that people reveal more when they think you're reacting, not calculating. What made this worth the effort wasn't the missing boat itself. It was the yellow paper taped to my garage door. Violation notice. Lake Ridge HOA. Boat stored in violation of CCNR Section 7.4b. Towed to authorized facility. Contact Harcourt Towing for retrieval. No warning, no email, no courtesy call. Just this single sheet of paper with a phone number at the bottom. The garage door had been open for maybe 40 minutes on Sunday afternoon, while I hosed down the deck. From the street, if you walked to the edge of the cul-de-sac and looked at just the right angle, you could see about 6 feet into the space. Enough for someone conducting what Vivian would call a compliance inspection. I pulled the notice off the door and walked back inside, setting my coffee down on the kitchen counter. My first move wasn't to call and demand answers. When a system fails, you don't react immediately. You analyze. I opened my laptop and pulled up the documents I'd reviewed before buying this house 6 months ago. The covenants, conditions, and restrictions. The rulebook that governs Lake Ridge. I'd read them carefully back then because I'd lived under HOA rule once before in Houston, and I swore I'd never repeat that mistake. Lake Ridge's version was refreshingly light. No paint color mandates, no approved mailbox lists, just basic provisions about noise, common area maintenance, and parking restrictions. Section 7.4b was unambiguous. No boats exceeding 20 feet may be stored in driveways or visible common areas. My boat was 18 feet, stored inside a structure that sat entirely within my property lines, not in any driveway or common space. The Phantom wasn't just a boat. It was a custom electric runabout I'd built over 2 years, retrofitted with GPS tracking, 360-degree cameras, and a security system that logged every movement within 10 feet of the hull. I'd designed it for quiet lake cruising, but the monitoring systems were professional grade. Everything was backed up to cloud storage in real time. I picked up my phone and dialed the number on the notice. It rang 4 times before a woman's voice answered, clipped and efficient. Harcourt Towing and Storage, how can I help you? I kept my tone neutral, just annoyed enough to sound genuine. This is Quinn Dalton. I'm calling about a boat that was towed from my property this morning. I need to know on what authority it was removed. When there was a pause, the sound of keys clicking. Mr. Dalton. Yes. Your boat was towed for violation of Lake Ridge HOA regulations. You'll need to contact the HOA board president, Vivian Harcourt, for details. Retrieval fee is $150 per day of storage, plus the towing fee of $400. I let that sink in. $150 per day. And who authorized the tow? Another pause. The HOA board president, Vivian Harcourt. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat back and opened a search engine, typing in Harcourt Towing and Storage, LLC. The business registry came up within seconds. Registered in 2019. Owner and operator, Vivian M. Harcourt. Registered agent, Vivian M. Harcourt. The same woman who ran the HOA had just sent my boat to her own impound lot. I stood up and walked to the window overlooking the lake. A dozen houses lined the shore, most with docks, a few with boats visible in driveways or side yards. No one else had received violation notices recently. No one else had been towed this month. I opened the community group chat on my phone and scrolled back through 6 months of messages, mostly complaints about lawn care schedules and reminders about trash pickup days. Then I found it, a post from 11 months ago, written by a man named Tim Callahan. Anyone else get a violation notice from Vivian about parking? They towed my trailer last week. I paid $1,800 to get it back. She said if I complained to the board, she'd put a lien on my house. 3 comments under the post. 2 people saying they'd had similar experiences. 1 person warning Callahan to just pay it and move on. The post had been deleted 2 months later, but I screenshotted the cached version and saved it to a folder on my desktop. A pattern was forming. New residents, expensive toys, sudden enforcement. Vivian had done this before. Then I called Vivian Harcourt directly. Her number was listed on the HOA website as the primary contact for violations. She answered on the second ring, her voice smooth and practiced. "This is Vivian," I introduced myself, keeping my tone calm but firm. "Ms. Harcourt, I'm calling about the boat that was towed from my garage this morning. I reviewed the CCNRs, and I don't believe Section 7.4b applies to enclosed private structures." She didn't hesitate. "Mr. Dalton, the board voted on an update to that section 3 months ago. All structures visible from the street or common areas are now subject to storage restrictions. Your garage door was open when the compliance inspector came through on Monday. The boat was visible. That's a violation." I glanced toward my garage. The door had been closed since I moved in, except for that brief Sunday cleaning session. She'd been watching. "And where can I find the meeting minutes for that vote?" Her pause was just long enough to be noticeable. "Those are available upon request. I'll have them sent to you within 10 business days." I thanked her and hung up. 10 business days. Standard bureaucratic delay tactic. Long enough to discourage most people from following up. Long enough for storage fees to climb into the 4 figures. I opened a new document on my laptop and began to type. Step 1. Let her think she's winning. I didn't drive to Harcourt Towing that day. I didn't call back demanding my boat. Instead, I spent the afternoon reading Texas Property Code Section 209.006, which governs HOA enforcement authority. The law was explicit. An HOA can enforce rules on common property, but anything within the boundaries of a homeowner's lot is protected unless the CCNRs specifically override that protection. My garage was private. My lot line was clearly marked on the survey I'd received at closing. Vivian had overstepped, but more importantly, she'd done it without proper notice. Section 209.0091 requires written notice, at least 10 days before enforcement action. I'd received nothing. No letter, no email, no warning of any kind, just a yellow piece of paper taped to my door after the fact. That was a due process violation under state law, and it was exactly what I needed her to do. Friday morning, Vivian sent an email to every resident in Lake Ridge. The subject line read, "Community Compliance Reminder," and the body was 3 paragraphs of passive-aggressive lecturing about how one resident, unnamed but clearly identifiable, had refused to comply with HOA regulations. She wrote that this behavior threatened property values and community standards, and that the board would not tolerate defiance of established rules. At the bottom, she'd attached a photo, my garage, taken from the street but at a noticeably elevated angle, as if captured from about 12 feet up, zoomed in just enough to show the space where the phantom had been. The image was dated Sunday at 2:15 p.m., the exact 30-minute window when I'd had the door open. I saved the email to my evidence folder and didn't reply. Vivian had spent 4 years building a reputation for crushing anyone who questioned her authority, and the board had learned long ago that staying quiet was easier than confronting her. Let her think silence meant defeat. By noon, I'd received 3 text messages from neighbors I barely knew. One asked if I was okay. Another said Vivian had done something similar to his son last year over a motorcycle. The third was from Tim Callahan himself. the man whose post I'd found in the community chat archives. He wrote, "She did the same thing to me. I have receipts if you need them." I replied immediately and asked if we could meet. He suggested coffee at a place 2 miles outside Lake Ridge, away from prying eyes. We met at 4 p.m. Callahan was in his mid-50s, graying at the temples, with the cautious look of someone who'd been burned before. He slid a manila folder across the table before I even ordered. Inside were copies of his violation notice, his towing receipt showing a total of $1,800, text messages from Vivian threatening to place a lien on his property if he appealed, and a handwritten log of every interaction he'd had with her over 6 weeks. "She targets new people," he said quietly. "Anyone who moves in with something expensive. Boats, RVs, trucks. She waits until they settle, then she strikes." I asked him why he didn't fight it. He looked down at his coffee. "Because I couldn't afford a lawyer, and she said she'd make my life hell if I tried." I spent the rest of Friday afternoon cross-referencing Callahan's timeline with property records. Vivian had been board president for 4 years. During that time, 14 vehicles or boats had been towed from Lake Ridge, all by Harcourt Towing. I pulled up the Texas Secretary of State Business Registry again and dug deeper. Harcourt Towing and Storage, LLC, had been registered in October of 2019, just 3 months after Vivian took office. The registered address was a commercial lot 15 miles south of Lake Ridge. I used satellite imagery to confirm the location. A fenced yard with 3 rows of impounded vehicles, a small office trailer, and a sign that read "Authorized Towing, No Trespassing." The lot wasn't listed as an official municipal impound facility. It was private. That meant every tow Vivian authorized went directly into her own business, creating a clear financial conflict that violated her fiduciary duty as board president. The pattern wasn't just unethical, it was systematically illegal. On Saturday, I filed a formal records request with the Lake Ridge HOA under the Texas Open Meetings Act. I asked for 3 things. Meeting minutes from the board vote, Vivian claimed, had updated Section 7.4b, financial records showing payments made to Harcourt Towing, a list of all compliance violations issued in the past 4 years. The law required the board to respond within 10 business days. I sent the request via certified mail with a return receipt, so there'd be no claim that they hadn't received it. Then I called a lawyer I'd worked with during my years in Houston, a woman named Angela Morrison, who specialized in property law. She listened to my summary without interrupting, and when I finished, she laughed, not mockingly, more like the sound of someone who'd just been handed an early Christmas gift. "Quinn, she's violating at least 4 sections of state law, but here's what I want you to do. Don't retrieve the boat yet. Let the fees pile up. Document everything. If she tries to escalate, let her. The deeper the hole, the better the case." I asked her how long. She said, 2 weeks minimum. 3 would be ideal. And if she threatens you in writing, save every word. That same afternoon, Vivian called me. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail, her tone shifting from professional to annoyed. "Mr. Dalton, this is Vivian Harcourt. Your boat has been in storage for 2 days. That's $300 so far, plus the original $400 tow fee. If you don't retrieve it within 7 days, we'll classify it as abandoned property and proceed with disposal under Texas Transportation Code. I strongly suggest you settle this matter before it gets more complicated." I played the message back twice, transcribed it word for word, and saved the audio file. Then I sent it to Angela. She replied within an hour. "That's coercion. She's threatening to seize property without due process. Texas Transportation Code Section 545.3051 only applies to vehicles blocking traffic or genuinely abandoned in public areas. Your boat was on private property. This is getting better by the hour." Sunday morning, I drove past the Harcourt Towing lot. I didn't stop or pull in. I just wanted to see the Phantom with my own eyes, confirm it was there and undamaged. The lot was surrounded by an 8-foot chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. I spotted the boat in the 3rd row, still on its trailer, covered with a blue tarp I hadn't put there. Security cameras were mounted on every corner of the fence. Good. That meant they'd have footage of the tow itself, including the lack of any notification process. I took 3 photos from the street. making sure the Harcourt towing sign was visible in the frame, then drove home. Angela had been right. The longer this went on, the worse Vivian's position became. Every day of storage fees she charged was another count of illegal conversion. Every threat she made added weight to a harassment claim. And the moment she tried to declare the boat abandoned, she'd cross the line into criminal territory. I just had to wait. Let her think she'd won. Let her get comfortable. Let her believe no one would challenge a system she'd been running for 4 years without opposition. Vivian Harcourt wasn't just abusing her authority. She'd built a machine designed to extract money from people too tired, too scared, or too broke to fight back. And I was about to dismantle it piece by piece. By Monday morning, I'd built a timeline that stretched across my kitchen table. 14 towing incidents over 4 years. New resident moves in with something expensive. Vivian issues a violation notice with little to no warning. Harcourt Towing removes the item within 48 hours. Resident pays to retrieve their property. No one appeals. The system worked because it was designed to prey on people who couldn't afford the time or money to challenge it. But there was something else I'd noticed while cross-referencing the dates. Every single tow happened within 90 days of the resident's move-in date. Vivian wasn't just targeting expensive items. She was targeting people who hadn't yet built relationships in the community, people who didn't know their neighbors well enough to organize resistance. It was calculated, methodical, and it pointed to something deeper than petty power tripping. On Tuesday, I sent Vivian a polite email requesting clarification on the updated CC&R section she'd mentioned during our phone call. I asked for the exact date of the board vote, the names of board members who'd participated, and a copy of the amended language. I kept the tone respectful, almost deferential, as if I were simply trying to understand the rules better. Her response came back within 3 hours. Mr. Dalton, as I mentioned previously, those records are available upon formal request and will be provided within 10 business days per HOA bylaws. Continued inquiries of this nature may be considered harassment of board officials. Please retrieve your boat promptly to avoid additional fees. I forwarded the email to Angela without comment. She replied with 2 words. She's spiraling. The mention of harassment was a tell. Vivian was used to people backing down after the first threat. My persistence was making her nervous. And nervous people make mistakes. Wednesday brought the first major break. A woman named Rachel Dunn contacted me through the community chat after seeing my name mentioned in one of Callahan's old threads. She'd lived in a different HOA called Riverside, about 30 miles east, from 2020 to 2022. Vivian had been on that board too, serving as treasurer. Rachel's car had been towed from inside her garage after Vivian claimed visibility violations. The fee to retrieve it was $950. When Rachel tried to file a complaint, Vivian threatened legal action. Rachel paid and moved out 6 months later. She still had the paperwork, texts from Vivian, receipts from Harcourt Towing. I asked her if she'd be willing to provide a statement. She said yes, without hesitation. I want that woman stopped. I spent Thursday digging into Vivian's history with other HOAs. Public records showed she'd held board positions in 3 communities over the past 6 years: Riverside, Meadowview, and Pinecrest. In each case, her tenure overlapped with the formation or expansion of Harcourt Towing's operations. Small communities like these rarely conducted background checks on board candidates, and HOA elections were often uncontested, which allowed someone like Vivian to move freely between developments without scrutiny. I contacted residents from all 3 communities through property owner records and sent carefully worded messages asking if anyone had experienced issues with towing enforcement. By Friday, I had responses from 11 people. 8 confirmed they'd been towed by Harcourt. Fees ranged from $700 to $2,000. One man said Vivian had threatened to put a lien on his home when he questioned the charges. The pattern was undeniable. Vivian wasn't running a single scam. She was running a coordinated operation across multiple HOAs, using her board positions to funnel business to her own company. Angela called me Friday evening at 6:20 p.m. She'd been reviewing the information I'd compiled and wanted to discuss strategy. Quinn, this isn't just a civil case anymore. What you've uncovered is organized fraud. Vivian is using her fiduciary position to enrich herself at the expense of homeowners in multiple communities. That's a violation of Texas Penal Code Section 32.45, misuse of official information. If the total exceeds $30,000, which I think it does, we're looking at felony theft charges. I asked her what the next step was. She said we needed to formalize everything: witness statements, financial records, a timeline showing her movement between HOAs and the corresponding uptick in towing incidents. Then we'd file a complaint with the Texas Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division and simultaneously pursue a civil suit for breach of fiduciary duty. But here's the key, she added. Don't retrieve the boat yet. Let her make one more move. If she tries to claim it as abandoned or sell it, that's conversion of property. It'll be the final nail. Saturday morning. My phone rang at 7:45 a.m. It was Vivian. I let it go to voicemail. She didn't leave a message this time, just hung up and called back 2 minutes later. I answered on the third ring, keeping my voice calm. "This is Quinn." She didn't bother with pleasantries. "Mr. Dalton, your boat has been in storage for 9 days. That's $1,350 in fees, plus the original tow charge. I'm calling as a courtesy to inform you that if you don't retrieve it by the end of business Monday, we will initiate abandonment proceedings. This is your final notice." I paused for exactly 3 seconds, long enough to sound uncertain. "Ms. Harcourt, I'm working on securing the funds. I'll have an answer for you by Monday afternoon." She softened slightly, sensing victory. "I appreciate your cooperation. Just contact Harcourt Towing directly to arrange payment and pickup." I thanked her and hung up. Then I texted Angela. She just threatened abandonment again, on a recorded line this time. Angela's response was immediate. "Perfect. Let her file the paperwork. The moment she does, we move." Monday arrived with surgical precision. I'd spent the weekend preparing 3 separate document packets, one for Angela, one for the Texas Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division, one for my own records. Each packet contained witness statements from 12 people across 4 HOAs, financial records showing Harcourt Towing's revenue stream, screenshots of threatening messages from Vivian, and a timeline mapping her board positions against towing incidents. The evidence was airtight, but I needed one more piece. I needed Vivian to act in front of witnesses. The Lake Ridge HOA board meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. at the community center. I arrived at 6:45 and took a seat in the front row. 23 residents filled the chairs behind me, more than had attended any meeting in the past 2 years. According to the archived agendas, word had spread. People wanted to see what would happen. Vivian walked in at 6:58, flanked by 2 other board members, Stuart Jacobson and a woman named Diane Keller. Vivian's expression shifted when she saw the crowd, but she recovered quickly and took her seat at the head table. She'd spent 4 years cultivating an image of unshakable authority, and every resident in this room had watched her crush dissent without consequence. That history gave her confidence, even now. Stuart opened the meeting with standard procedural items, budget updates and landscaping schedules, before Vivian cleared her throat and addressed the room. "Before we move to the new business, I want to address a situation involving Mr. Quinn Dalton, who is present tonight. Mr. Dalton has repeatedly refused to comply with updated storage regulations and has made unfounded accusations against this board. His boat remains impounded due to his own negligence, and his harassment of board officials will not be tolerated." She looked directly at me as she spoke, her tone firm and rehearsed. I didn't react. I simply opened the folder in my lap and waited. When she finished, I stood up. My voice was calm, measured, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Ms. Harcourt, you mentioned updated storage regulations. Can you provide the date of the board vote that amended Section 7.4b of the CCNRs?" She blinked once. "That information is available through formal records request, which you've already submitted." I nodded. "I did submit that request 11 days ago via certified mail. Texas Property Code Section 209.006 requires HOA boards to respond within 10 business days. You're now in violation of state law." A murmur rippled through the room. Stuart Jacobson leaned forward, glancing at Vivian with genuine confusion on his face. "Vivian, did we vote on storage amendments?" She hesitated, and for the first time, I saw uncertainty flash across her expression. "It was an executive decision based on precedent and community standards." I kept my tone even. "There is no executive authority in the bylaws that allows you to unilaterally change covenant restrictions. More importantly, Texas Property Code Section 209.0091 requires written notice at least 10 days before enforcement action. I received no notice of any kind. That's a due process violation." Stewart picked up his phone and started scrolling, presumably looking up the statutes I'd cited. Diane shifted in her seat, her eyes moving between Vivian and me, visibly uncomfortable. I continued without pause. "There's another issue. Harcourt Towing and Storage, the company that towed my boat, is owned and operated by you, Ms. Harcourt. According to the Texas Secretary of State Business Registry, you registered the LLC 3 months after you became board president. You've been authorizing tows to your own company, creating a direct financial conflict of interest. That's a violation of your fiduciary duty as a board officer." The room erupted. Residents started talking over each other, some demanding answers, others asking how this had gone unnoticed. Stewart stood up slowly, his face pale, his voice unsteady, as if he were processing the information in real time. "Vivian, is this true? Do you own the towing company?" Vivian's composure cracked. Her voice rose slightly. Defensive. "It's a legitimate business, completely separate from my board duties. Mr. Dalton is twisting facts to avoid paying what he owes." I reached into my folder and pulled out a single bound document, holding it up so the room could see the thickness of the file. "I've gathered statements from 11 former residents across 3 other HOAs where you held board positions: Riverside, Meadowview, and Pinecrest. They were all towed by Harcourt during your tenure. The total collected in fees across all 4 communities exceeds $47,000. This isn't about one boat or one HOA. It's about a coordinated scheme to use your authority for private profit." I set the document down on the table. "I've already filed a formal complaint with the Texas Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division and retained legal counsel. You'll be served with a summons for breach of fiduciary duty within 48 hours. Vivian slammed her hand on the table, her control fully slipping now. "Those are baseless accusations. I'll sue you for defamation if you continue this." I looked at her evenly, letting the silence settle for a moment before responding. "Everything I've stated tonight is supported by public records, witness testimony, and your own business filings. Truth is an absolute defense to defamation." The silence that followed was absolute. Diane stood up and stepped away from the table, distancing herself physically from Vivian. Stewart's hands were shaking slightly as he gripped the edge of the table, clearly struggling with the realization that he'd been sitting on a board with someone running an illegal operation. He took a breath and spoke carefully. "I move to suspend Ms. Harcourt from the board pending an independent investigation into these allegations." Diane seconded immediately, her voice firm. The vote was 4-0, with Vivian abstaining and 1 board member absent. Vivian grabbed her bag and walked out without another word, the door slamming behind her. Stewart turned to the remaining residents, still visibly shaken. "We'll be hiring an outside auditor to review all HOA financial transactions from the past 5 years. If anyone has been affected by improper towing or enforcement actions, please contact me directly." I sat back down as the room slowly settled. 23 people had just witnessed Vivian Harcourt lose control of the machine she'd spent 4 years building. And this was only the beginning. Wednesday morning at 9:15 a.m., Vivian made her first major mistake since the board meeting. She posted a message in the community group chat claiming I was a hostile individual attempting to destroy Lake Ridge through frivolous lawsuits. She attached a photo of my house taken from the street, captioned with, "This is the man costing your community thousands in legal fees." I screenshot everything and forwarded it to Angela. Her response came back in under 5 minutes. "That's defamation per se and targeted harassment. She's panicking. Let her keep going." I didn't reply to the post. Vivian was doing exactly what Angela had predicted, digging herself deeper while thinking she was regaining control. Thursday brought the turning point. Angela called at 2:30 p.m. with news that changed everything. Quinn, the subpoena came back. Vivian didn't just run this scheme in 4 HOAs. We found 3 additional communities where she served as a board member or paid consultant. Harcourt Towing conducted 39 total impounds across 7 locations over 6 years. Total revenue, $127,000. I sat down slowly, processing the scale. This wasn't opportunistic fraud. It was systematic. Angela continued. I've already forwarded everything to the Attorney General's office and contacted the Texas Rangers Economic Crimes Unit. They're opening a formal investigation. This is racketeering territory now. Friday brought a desperate settlement offer from Vivian's attorney. Waive all fees, refund the tow charge, resign from the board, in exchange for dropping everything. Angela read it to me over the phone. I didn't hesitate. No, this isn't about the money. It never was. If I take a settlement, she walks away and does it again somewhere else. Tell them we're proceeding with everything. Saturday morning at 6:40 a.m. My phone buzzed with an alert from the Phantom's GPS. The boat was moving. I bolted upright, opened the tracking app, and watched the signal leave the Harcourt towing lot. Someone was towing it. I called Angela immediately. They're moving the boat. She answered on the first ring, already awake. Your GPS is recording everything, right? I confirmed. The signal moved south for 3 miles, then turned onto the private road leading to the public lake access. I grabbed my keys, threw on a jacket, and drove straight there. When I arrived at 6:55 a.m., I parked on the hill overlooking the boat ramp and pulled out my binoculars. What I saw made my pulse spike. Vivian Harcourt herself was backing the Phantom down the ramp in her black SUV. No employee, no witness, just her. She unhitched the trailer, climbed into the boat, and started the electric motor. The system I'd built wasn't just cameras and GPS. It had a remote override function that activated the moment someone without the paired access key tried to operate it. I watched from the hill as the motor engaged smoothly. Vivian steered away from the dock, heading toward the center of the lake. She was probably planning to take it out, document some fabricated mechanical issue, then use that as retroactive justification for the impound. Tampering with evidence. Exactly what Angela had warned her might try. I pulled out my phone, opened the security app, and activated containment mode. The Phantom's steering locked instantly into a pre-programmed route, a tight figure 8 pattern, programmed to run continuously until manually overridden with the access code. Vivian yanked the wheel. Nothing happened. The boat continued its smooth, relentless loop. She tried again, pulling harder. The steering didn't respond. I could see her lean forward, frantically pressing buttons on the control panel. The motor kept running. The boat kept circling. She stood up, looked around as if searching for help, then sat back down and tried cutting the power. The system rerouted to the backup battery. The Phantom didn't even slow. I watched through the binoculars as her body language shifted from confusion to panic. She started waving her arms, shouting toward the shore, but the lake was empty at this hour. No one else was there, just her, circling. I waited 5 minutes, then called the county sheriff's non-emergency line. I'd like to report a stolen boat currently being operated without permission on the public lake off County Road 12. GPS tracking shows it was taken from a private impound lot about an hour ago. The operator appears to be in distress. 2 sheriff's deputies arrived 12 minutes later. By then, Vivian had been circling for 23 minutes. One deputy launched a rescue boat from the dock, while the other took my statement. "That's your boat out there," I confirmed. "Do you know the individual operating it?" I nodded. "Vivian Harcourt. She's the owner of the towing company that illegally impounded my boat 19 days ago. I did not give her permission to move it or operate it." The deputy glanced at his partner, who was already motoring toward the Phantom. "How do we stop it?" I handed him my phone with the override app open. "There's a 6-digit access code. I'll provide it once she's safely off the boat." The rescue deputy pulled alongside the Phantom. Vivian was sitting in the driver's seat, gripping the wheel, her face pale and her hair disheveled. She was no longer shouting. She just looked defeated. The deputy helped her onto the rescue boat. Then I remotely entered the shutdown code. The Phantom's motor cut immediately, drifting to a silent stop in the middle of the lake, back at the dock. Vivian refused to make eye contact with me. The deputies asked her directly why she'd taken the boat. She stammered something about needing to inspect it for safety violations, that it was still technically impounded property. One deputy cut her off. "Ma'am, do you own Harcourt Towing?" She nodded weakly. "And you authorized the impound of this boat 19 days ago." Another nod. "Mr. Dalton has documentation showing the impound was conducted without proper legal notice, and that all fees have been voided by his attorney. You just removed his property from your lot without his permission, and operated it without authorization. That's theft. We're going to need you to come down to the station and provide a formal statement." Vivian's voice cracked. "I was just trying to prove it wasn't safe. I wasn't stealing it." The deputy's expression didn't change. "You took someone else's property without permission and attempted to operate it. That's the definition of theft, ma'am." They took her information, issued her a citation, and told her she'd be contacted by the district attorney's office. The entire interaction was documented in the incident report. The Phantom was released to me immediately, still dripping lake water. The GPS log showed exactly 23 minutes of continuous figure-8 operation. 23 minutes of Vivian Harcourt trapped on a boat she'd stolen, unable to control it, screaming for help that didn't come until the law arrived. As I hitched the trailer back to my truck, Vivian sat in her SUV with the door open, head in her hands. Angela called at 8:10 a.m. I told her everything. She was silent for 3 seconds, then burst out laughing. "Quinn, she stole your boat and got arrested by your boat. This is poetic justice on a level I've never seen." I smiled. "She couldn't leave it alone." Angela's voice turned serious. "She just committed felony theft on camera, with witnesses, with a police report. She's done." I looked back at the Phantom, water still dripping from the hull. "Yeah, she is." Monday at 6 p.m., the Lake Ridge Community Center was packed. 91 residents filled every available seat, with another dozen standing along the back wall. Word had spread about the independent audit results, and people wanted answers. I sat in the third row this time, not the front. The evidence would speak for itself. Stuart Jacobson, now interim board president, sat at the head table with Diane Keller and 2 other board members. Auditor Michael Brennan from Clearview Financial sat to Stuart's left with his laptop and a thick binder. Also present was investigator Sarah Mills from the Texas Rangers Economic Crimes Unit, sitting in the front row in a dark suit. Her presence alone shifted the atmosphere. This wasn't just an HOA meeting anymore. It was the beginning of a public reckoning. Stuart opened at 6:15 p.m., his voice somber. "Mr. Brennan will present the audit findings." Michael Brennan stood, adjusting his glasses. Lake Ridge HOA paid Harcourt Towing over $12,000 in compliance enforcement fees with no signed contract. All payment authorizations were signed by Vivian Harcourt, who owns Harcourt Towing. This is a clear conflict of interest. Additionally, 14 towing incidents occurred during Ms. Harcourt's tenure, all handled by her company. In the 3 years prior, only 2 incidents occurred with a different vendor. The disparity was damning. Tim Callahan stood up from the middle row. "I paid $1,800 to get my trailer back last year. Vivian told me if I complained, she'd put a lien on my house. I kept the text messages because I was afraid." Margaret Flynn raised her hand. "She towed my son's truck 2 years ago. $900. He'd parked it in our driveway for 1 weekend." One by one, residents shared their stories, each following the same pattern of threats and disproportionate fees. Investigator Mills stood, her voice calm and authoritative. "This is now an active criminal investigation. We've identified 39 victims across 7 HOAs, where Ms. Harcourt held board positions between 2017 and 2024. Total financial impact exceeds $127,000. We're pursuing charges under Texas Penal Code, Section 32.45, misuse of official information, and Section 31.03, theft over $30,000, a third-degree felony. Additionally, on Saturday morning, Ms. Harcourt personally removed Mr. Dalton's boat without authorization and operated it on a public lake, resulting in additional charges of vehicle theft and evidence tampering. Sheriff's deputies documented the incident. She placed business cards on the table. 6 people immediately approached her. Stewart continued, "Ms. Harcourt has resigned. We've terminated agreements with Harcourt Towing and are working to recover funds paid from HOA accounts. We're revising our CC&Rs to include mandatory conflict of interest disclosures and requiring competitive bids for vendor contracts over $500. Diane added simply. "We failed to ask the right questions. We're committed to rebuilding trust." Someone in the back started clapping. It spread slowly, with grim acknowledgement. The applause was for the truth finally being out in the open. As people filed out, Stewart approached me. "Mr. Dalton, if you hadn't pushed back, this would still be going on." I shook my head. "You didn't know. She built the system to make sure no one would," he said quietly. "I heard about Saturday morning. That must have been surreal, watching her trapped on your own boat." I kept my expression neutral. It was necessary. She needed to prove she couldn't stop herself, even when she knew she was being watched. Stewart extended his hand. I shook it. As I walked out into the parking lot, 91 people had just witnessed the complete dismantling of Vivian Harcourt's operation. Her reputation was destroyed. Her business is under investigation. Her authority is gone. And in 2 days, a courtroom would make it official. Justice didn't always come fast, but when it came, it was absolute. Wednesday morning at 10 a.m., I stood in the parking lot of Harcourt Towing and Storage for the first time as someone with legal authority on my side. Angela Morrison was with me, along with a county sheriff's deputy named Torres, who'd been assigned to oversee the vehicle release. The gate was already open when we arrived. A woman in her 20s, who introduced herself as the lot manager, handed me a clipboard without making eye contact. "Sign here. No fees. Your boat is in row 3. Her voice was flat, mechanical, as if she'd been instructed to say nothing beyond the bare minimum. I signed the release form and walked toward the Phantom. It sat exactly where I'd seen it 3 weeks ago, still covered with the blue tarp, untouched. I pulled the tarp off and inspected the hull. No damage. The GPS tracker I'd installed was still active, and according to the log, the boat hadn't moved an inch since it arrived 19 days ago. As I hitched the trailer to my truck, a black sedan pulled into the lot. Vivian Harcourt stepped out. She looked different, thinner. Her hair wasn't styled the way it had been at the board meetings, and there were shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't fully hide. She walked toward me slowly, stopping about 10 feet away. Angela stepped forward instinctively, but I raised a hand. "It's fine." Vivian looked at the Phantom, then at me. Her voice was quiet, stripped of the commanding tone I'd heard before. "You got what you wanted." I shook my head. "This was never about what I wanted. It was about stopping you from doing this to anyone else." She exhaled, her shoulders sagging slightly. "I didn't think anyone would fight back. No one ever did before. They just paid and moved on." I kept my tone even. "That's why you kept doing it. Because you could." Vivian glanced at Angela, then back at me. "My lawyer says I should take the plea deal. 3 years. He says if I go to trial, it could be 10. I didn't respond immediately. I let the silence sit between us. Then I said, 39 people trusted their HOA to protect them. You used that trust to steal from them. 3 years sounds like you're getting off easy." Her face tightened, but she didn't argue. She just nodded once, slowly, as if she'd already accepted it. "I know." She turned and walked back to her car without another word. The deputy watched her leave, then looked at me. "That's it. No yelling, no threats." I shook my head. "She's already lost everything that mattered to her. There's nothing left to say." 6 months later, the resolution was complete. Vivian Harcourt pled guilty to theft over $30,000 and misuse of official information. She was sentenced to 3 years in state prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. Harcourt Towing and Storage, LLC, was dissolved by court order, and the business assets were liquidated to provide restitution to victims. 39 people received full refunds, totaling $127,000. Lake Ridge HOA implemented new governance policies, including term limits for board members, mandatory financial audits every 2 years, and public transparency requirements for all vendor contracts. Stuart Jacobson remained interim president, and later won election to a full term with overwhelming support. The Phantom sat in my garage now, exactly where it had been before this all started. I'd added a small engraved plate to the hull. Phantom, towed unlawfully on May 14, 2024. Returned by court order June 3, 2024. 19 days. 39 victims vindicated. And it wasn't a trophy. It was a reminder. Power without accountability will always be abused. But accountability, when pursued with patience and evidence, will always prevail. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt powerless against a system designed to exploit rather than protect, I want you to know something. You don't need to be loud to be effective. You don't need to be aggressive to demand justice. You just need to be thorough, patient, and unwilling to let illegal behavior go unchallenged. Document everything, know your rights, and never let someone's position convince you that they're untouchable. Subscribe to Karma Neighbors if you want to see more stories about people who refused to back down when they were wronged. Because the best revenge isn't anger, it's accountability.